Hi everyone and welcome to the round 11 report from Corus. There were two wins in the round. Van Wely beat Tviakov after a terrible endgame blunder by the latter, and Magnus Carlsen beat Lenier Dominguez, which I chose to feature for this video. Carlsen had the white pieces and opened with d4, after which came knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3 and d5. The ever popular Grunfeld defense, named after the player of the same name who introduced it to the mainstream in 1922 with a win against future world champion Alexander Alekhine. Play continued with one of the many book lines, knight f3, bishop g7 and queen b3, which is adding more pressure to d5. This is known as the Russian system, and it more or less forces d takes c4. And after queen takes c4, white will have a central pawn majority at the cost of a tempo or two when the white queen is forced to retreat due to pieces coming out and pawns, forcing her back with tempo. So Dominguez castled. Now come e4, a6, e5 and b5, forcing the queen to move. So queen b3 and now knight fd7, which is the last book move of the game, because here Carlsen played knight g5, which may be part of his preparation, but it's hard to know. This prevents an immediate rook e8 in view of queen takes f7, and may also have the provocation of h6 as one of its main aims. So knight b6 anyway, Sal Dominguez continued. Now came bishop e3, knight c6 and rook d1, eyeing the queen here on d8. Now came bishop f5, which gives white an edge. Better was bishop g4, where after knight f3 and knight a5, black is equalized. So bishop f5 anyway, and now bishop e2, which loses the edge that bishop f5 gave to white and restores equality into the position. Stronger was e6, where best play goes knight takes d4, bishop takes d4 and bishop takes t4, and white is significantly better, at least for now, but it's best not to pursue such activity with your king still in the center. Bobby Fischer won several famous games in the Grunfeld in such a fashion, and also white gives up the bishop pair in this line, so Carlsen continued more conservatively with his move bishop e2 instead. So now came knight a5, getting a tempo on the queen, and b4 is the best square for the queen, and now knight ac4, and Carlsen castled. He's not concerned with the loss of the bishop pair if knight takes e3, because after f takes e3, white has an even stronger pawn center and the open f file to work with. So f6, challenging the white center at the cost of creating a bad defensive hole at e6 and weakening the a2 to g8 diagonal, which are both factors that Dominguez will regret later. So knight f3 and knight takes e3, which gives white an edge again in the position. Better was e6, where after bishop f4, rook f7 and rook c1, it's an equal game according to Fritz, although this rook f7 maneuver is a bit odd, but he obviously has something in mind with his thinking. So knight takes e3 and f takes e3. And here Carlsen's positional style is evident, with his pawns on opposite colours squares to that of his bishop, and his rooks on soon to be opened files, as well as both of his knights and his queen very well placed and all very nicely coordinated with each other. It's all a very smooth and nice play. So f takes e5 and d takes e5, which is the correct way to continue, and better than knight takes e5 because of queen d6, and black has a significant edge after, for example, a3, bishop takes e5, d takes e5 and queen takes e5. It's a line that Fritz recommended. So d takes e5 anyway, opening up the d file, and the f file has been opened with this sequence as well, so it's all good for these better developed white pieces compared to the black pieces. So queen e8, just moving out of the way of the rook on d1, and now queen c5, attacking the c7 pawn. So rook c8, and now a curious move from Carlsen with a4, which is essentially a pawn sacrifice that gives black a small edge. Better in Fritz's opinion was knight h4, and now it's white who has the edge in the position. So after a4, knight takes a4 is how Dominguez chose to play the position, which is again strange. The only logic behind it is that he gets to trade off his slightly worse knight that was on b6 for this better placed knight at c3, but black could have won a pawn instead with bishop c2, and after the rook moves, bishop takes a4. And it's impossible to know what Carlsen had planned here. Perhaps he'll reveal it in the press conference. One possibility is that he would sack the exchange to acquire a dangerous bishop pair. In particular, this light square bishop would be vicious, given the weak light squares in black's position. So maybe he wouldn't move this rook now, he would just allow it to be taken, and play something like maybe knight e4 instead. Although it would take, very good judgment to do that. In fact, no, knight e4 would be bad. Maybe knight g5, something along those lines. But hopefully he'll reveal it in the press conference anyway, because there's no way he would have missed this line. So it'd be interesting to know what he was thinking. But knight takes a4 anyway is what Dominguez played. So Carlsen played knight takes a4 and b takes a4. And both players seemed not to be concerned too much with their pawn structure in this game, because now there's 4 doubled pawns and 7 isolated pawns altogether in the position. It's fairly unusual. So Carlsen continued with knight d4 anyway, getting the knight to a strong central square. And now rook b8 from Dominguez, which is taking control of the semi-open file and taking aim at the b2 pawn, which is a certain target for black now. And here Carlsen played g4, which is perhaps an attempt to create complications, as his opponent was in a small bit of time trouble already, with 17 moves still to come until the time control. But this was unnecessarily weakening this g4 move. Better was knight c6, where best play goes rook b6 and knight takes e7 check, and king h8 with equality and a lively position. So g4 anyway from Carlsen, and now bishop e4, and this e4 square is an outpost square for black now in the position. It's a weakness in the white defense. And knight e6, which is by the same token a weakness in the black defense, and this knight is very well posted on e6. Now came rook takes f1 check, bishop takes f1, as opposed to rook takes f1, because it's better to keep the rook on the d file, because it immobilizes the b8 rook for the time being. So the b2 pawn here is safe. If rook takes b2, then rook d8 is winning the queen. So yeah, bishop takes f1, and next came c6, which is just preserving the c pawn from the attack from the knight and the queen. And now knight g5, attacking the bishop. So bishop d5, e4, bishop b3, attacking the rook, bishop c4 check, and e6, which is a small inaccuracy that gives white an edge in the position. Better was bishop takes c4, where after queen takes c4, e6, and knight takes e6, bishop takes e5, and rook f1, white has good positional compensation for the pawn, which makes it an equal game overall. So after e6 came knight takes e6, creating 2 passed pawns for white, which will be decisive later. And here came bishop takes c4, taking on d1, of course, is a blunder because of knight c7 check, winning the queen. So bishop takes c4 and queen takes c4, and now in bad time trouble, Dominguez blundered with king h8. Bishop takes e5 was the move to keep black in the game, though this would have been very hard to play, given that white would now have a discovered check with his queen and knight, which makes it a tactical minefield for black. And taking into account that he was also in bad time trouble, this is pretty much an impossible move to play. So king h8 anyway. is what he did play. Okay, that's the end of part 1.